In January of 2014, Justin Bieber was arrested and charged with a DUI. The police falsely claimed that he had been intoxicated and under the influence of drugs as he was driving the streets of Miami, Florida. The police officer that made his arrest had a previous record of wrongly accusing people, but the public was unaware of his past. Also, the GPS readings from his car were released later that month and showed that Justin was going 27 miles per hour, while the police officer claimed he was going 55 to 60 miles per hour. The media over-exaggerated the situation, causing the public to believe false information, and less than a week later, the accusations were quickly retracted. However, the public never learned that the information was retracted. Instead, the public continues to believe the false information and will never learn that the information was over-exaggerated. Although Bieber did commit these offenses, it was not to the extent the media portrayed it as. The media over-exaggerated the information and caused for the misunderstanding of the public and never told the public the new information. The media is guilty of twisting the information and causing the public to believe a false sense of reality without clearing it up when new information was found. We realize that the media is not true all the time. After reading the story about Justin, we came to the conclusion that the media does not provide the public with an accurate representation of what is going on. So a question that arises from this conclusion is, what is the media's role in influencing our knowledge of current events? The only way we are able to gain knowledge about the world is through media. Media has the most significant role in forming our knowledge of the world. They have the biggest influence, they can do whatever they want with it and manipulate it. You can say you're using reason and logic to determine if the information is true, but you're still basing it off of what the media says. But if the media didn't say anything, then we wouldn't know anything at all. Another question that arises from this topic is, how is the public able to perceive accurate information if the media is continuously over-exaggerating certain situations? The public will never be able to have an accurate knowledge of what occurred because the media does not portray it to us. If the media does not tell us the information, the public will never be able to know what truly happens, therefore causing their knowledge to always be flawed on the event. As the public, we rely on the information the media presents us with because we're unable to see the events ourselves. If some of the things they tell us are exaggerated, how are we supposed to believe any of the things they say? As the public, we can't believe everything the media tells us blindly, because in order for that to happen, the media would have to be completely honest and their main intention would have to be to inform us. However, that's not the case. Their main focus is to sell tabloids and get their ratings up. They're capitalists. They want to get people's attention and keep them watching, so they exaggerate events to make it more interesting because people would lose focus if there were only boring events on the news. So they add and twist details in stories in order to make the story more interesting. By doing that, they're manipulating the public to believe what they want us to believe. It's propaganda. It's not the truth. We as the public have faith that they will tell us the truth, so nobody thinks to question the validity of the media. Because of that, our understanding of the world and current events are not correct. This example has occurred before in history. Hitler manipulated the minds of millions of people to blindly follow his words as law, and they followed him like sheep without thinking on their own. He was able to control the public due to their failure to use their own logic and reason when it came to perceiving the things he said. Since we can't believe everything the media tells us, we need to use logic and reason and take into consideration that what the media tells us may be over-exaggerated or false. We must think on our own to gain accurate knowledge of the events going on around us. And if we can't believe what the media tells us, how are we supposed to have an accurate understanding of the world? We won't have an accurate understanding of the world if we just blindly believe what the media tells us. However, if we use logic and reason, we will be better able to understand the world, but it will still be flawed because we will never be able to share what is true and what is not. Even if we use logic, that doesn't guarantee that it is accurate because what could seem logical might not actually be happening. Well, even though we're not able to form a perfect understanding of what is going on, we still need to try to gain as much accurate information as we can with what we are provided with and our mind. How does a person use perception, language, emotion, and reason to differentiate between fact and hyperbole? In order for us to differentiate between what is fact and what is hyperbole, we need to take what the media says and use our senses to analyze the situation to determine what we believe actually happened. The only things we can believe are the things we see ourselves. You think you would be able to believe yourself because no one is manipulating what you see. Counter-argument. However, in a psychological study, they had people witness a crime, and when asked later on who committed the crime, the majority of the people said the black guy committed the crime, when in fact it was the white guy. What we think we see is not even what happens sometimes. There are so many different aspects that we think we see, but we don't see. Stereotypes made them have an unclear view of the events that occurred and affected what they thought they saw. In reality, we can't even believe what we see because our perception of the world is so flawed. Our perception is flawed because we are biased, we have stereotypes, and our eyesight inhibits what we see. Our minds trick us. We can't form a true perception of the world because either our minds manipulates it or society does. How are we supposed to make valid conclusions on what we see if we can't even control our own senses? Our schema affects what we think we see. A schema is a cognitive framework or concept that helps organize and interpret information. Schemas can be useful because they allow us to take shortcuts in interpreting the vast amount of information that is available in our environment. However, these mental frameworks also cause us to exclude pertinent information to instead focus on only things that confirm our pre-existing beliefs and ideas. Schemas can contribute to stereotypes and make it difficult to retain new information that does not conform to our established ideas about the world. The media affects our schema. The ideals we constantly see portrayed on TV will influence how we see the world. If the media constantly focuses on one element of a story, then the public loses focus on what the whole event was even about. It takes one story and turns it into another by focusing on information that supports our schema. An example in which this happened is in the case of Trayvon Martin, a 17-year-old who was shot and killed while unarmed by a 30-year-old white Hispanic man in Sanford, Florida, on February 26, 2012. This story made national news and was recognized by the president and countless celebrities. However, less than 6 months later, Marley Lyon, a 17-year-old, was shot and killed while unarmed by a 30-year-old black man in Charleston, South Carolina, on June 16, 2012. This story never made it past the local news. You tell me, what's the difference? The media took a horrific story about a teenager being shot and killed and turned it into a story about racism in the case of Trayvon Martin. However, when it was a white kid being killed, no one cared about it. The media latched on to a detail of Trayvon Martin's story and took it as far as they could go. They did this because they knew the public would listen to a story about a black kid getting killed, but not a white kid. The media only cares about making money, and they can only do that if they grasp your attention. They don't tell us all of the event, they just pick and choose what they'll think we'll react to. Another example of how media influences our perception of stories is when they take statements out of context and over-exaggerate it without ever explaining the rest of the situation. So the media never gets in the know. You know, yo. Like with the situation of Phil Robertson. In an interview with GQ magazine, Phil Robertson was asked what his opinion of gay marriage was. He said that he personally believed it was a sin. He repeatedly said sayings such as, "That's just me," "I'm just saying," and "it seems like to me," to further emphasize that they were personal beliefs. However, the media took his quote out of context and eliminated the parts emphasizing that they were his personal beliefs. The media then took it to mean that not only he, or his family, or even Christians, but that all people even remotely like him thought these beliefs. The LGBT community ended up getting him fired from the show, and many stores stopped selling his family's Duck Dynasty and Duck Commander products. It wasn't until the TV station's ratings started dropping, and the family threatened to stop doing the show that they realized they needed him on the show. This situation depicts how the media does not provide the public with an accurate portrayal of events. In August 2013, the news made a big deal of the fact that while Justin Bieber was in a hotel room, he walked out to his balcony and started playing a game with some of his close friends by spitting off the balcony and aiming at a bush to see who could get closest. Earlier that day, Justin posted a video of his fans outside the hotel. The media twisted these two events to make it seem as if Justin was spitting on his fans. The public trusted what the media portrayed to be true and believed that a 20-year-old would spit on his fans. A 20-year-old boy who relies on his fans and who earlier that day posted a video about how much he appreciates them. However, the public is so stupid, gullible, and narrow-minded that they believe the situation exactly as the media portrayed it without questioning the validity or truthfulness of the situation. The public did not use their own reason and logic to think for themselves and notice how that doesn't make any sense. They should use reason and logic to come up with the conclusion that him playing a game with his friends is normal, but him spitting on fans is just illogical. Why would someone who relies on their fans spit on them? As the public, we must use reason and logic. People can do this by actually thinking about what the media says and determining if it actually correlates with what the event was. If it doesn't correlate to the situation, it is a sign that it is false, and that the media could either be over-exaggerating it or making a story where there isn't one. Counter-argument. Although reason and logic should be used to the public's benefit in order to sort through information and details and determine what seems logical to form a sense of reality and truth to what is going on in the world,
Logic and reason should also play a negative role in allowing us to formulate what we believe is going on. In the previous example, we stated how people can use their reason and logic to think about a situation, and if certain details or areas of a story seem illogical and do not make sense, this can allow the public to differentiate and determine what part of the story is valid and what part is hyperbole. However, sometimes events may occur that seem very illogical and do not make sense to us, but they are in fact true, although they sound very improbable and do not make sense with what we believe to be right or consider normal in society. An example of this occurred in March 2014. An incident made national news that depicted a story about a mother's attempts to kill her children by driving her car into the ocean with her kids in it. When we as the public are presented with this story, it is almost too horrific and horrendous to even comprehend. This situation does not make sense to us logically because the action the mother took to harm her own children does not make sense to what we associate with mothers as loving and caring to their children. Our logic and reasoning skills in this way hinder us from understanding what exactly happened. This example shows that we cannot rely on logic and reason in order to come up with what actually happened in an event because things may seem improbable and do not correlate to a situation may still have occurred. The idea that a mother would try and kill her own children is not logical in any sense. However, it is what happened in this specific event. Therefore, we as the public can attempt to differentiate between what the media tells us is true or exaggerated by using our logic and reason and what makes sense and correlates with the situation. But sometimes even this isn't enough because the world and its inhabitants are sometimes crazy and do things that don't make sense to us logically, no matter how much reason and logic we use to try and understand. Besides perception and reason, our emotion will also help us differentiate between fact and hyperbole. With everything that has been happening in Syria in the recent months, we can see how emotion plays a role in discovering the truth and the information the media provides us with. The media has continuously made it seem as if it is only the Syrian government hurting the citizens. However, as more and more people have been coming out in the eye of the public, we have been told that this is all a lie. It is not only the government hurting the citizens, but also the citizens hurting the government. However, the media only tells us about the government harming its citizens and over-exaggerating all of these situations because they know that it will receive more of a response from the public. Yes, a lot of bad things are going on in Syria, and a lot of people are dying. But what the rest of the world outside of the people actually in Syria do not know is that the people of the government are getting just as hurt as the citizens of the country. The rebels are. The media does not want us to know that it is going both ways, though, because then they wouldn't get as large a reaction out of the public. When we think that it is only the innocent citizens being brutally killed by their own government, we'll react in a very large way. But if everyone figured out that the feelings were going both ways, then our reaction would be toned down because then we would see the citizens are as innocent as we originally thought. Emotion hurts us in deciding whether or not something is true, because as human beings, we have the tendency to become easily emotionally attached to things without even thinking if it sounds logical before we act. The media uses this to their advantage because they can take a few small parts of a story and turn it into a full-blown story that will keep the public watching for a very long time, further increasing their ratings and the money they earn. The public doesn't think about what is going on and ask themselves questions such as, what is happening and why is it happening, and does the information the media is telling us sound logical? Instead, they are just being gullible and think that everything the media tells us must be true. The media could be telling us something completely wrong, but if it messes with our emotions, we will never notice because we will just become emotionally attached, and the idea of logic and reason go out the window. On the other hand, our emotions could help us because it makes us act immediately during times of need. Like with the earthquakes that happened in Haiti and Japan, the world came together immediately and raised money to help the people in need and help the countries get back on track. But sometimes emotion helps us because if we didn't have that initial emotional attachment, then we would completely ignore everything we saw in the news. Although media companies sometimes use and abuse this, it is because of emotion that we even continue watching the news. Emotion allows us to first connect with the story, which then leads us to use logic and reason to decipher what we have just heard. The language the media utilizes has a large influence on how we, as the public, are able to perceive events. The words chosen to tell a story can affect the message portrayed. The media is capable of switching around words and manipulating the public based on the word choice they use in order to depict their message. The type and weight of the words the media utilizes have a large influence on how the public perceives the event that occurred. The media's manipulation of certain words and phrases can be to our disadvantage when we are trying to understand what is true and what is false in our world. An example of this is propaganda, Propaganda is a special form of media that the government is in charge of in order to control the minds of the people and get them to side with the government in different situations. The government is able to manipulate the minds of the people by either making situations seem better than they are or using language to blow things out of proportion. An example of how the media controlled by the government was able to manipulate the minds of their people during World War I, when the British government used propaganda in order to entice more men into joining the army to help the war effort. Due to the fact that a lot of men were needed to provide Britain with enough men on the battlefield to be successful, the British government began to implement war propaganda at home and abroad. These forms of posters showed scenes and had words that made the men feel guilty and obligated to go to war in order to protect their fellow citizens and fight for their country. In this way, the British army grew substantially and was able to fight better than it would have without these men. An example of a poster they used was a poster that portrayed a picture of a woman looking out her window with the words, "Women of Britain, say go." This poster uses language in order to manipulate the minds and hearts of the men in order to get them to act and join the army. The language the poster implements demonstrates that all of the women of Britain want the men to go to war and to protect them and to be strong, brave men. Men begin to believe that in order to be desirable to women and be a real man, they had to prove themselves and their strength by fighting in the war. In this way, the media was able to manipulate the minds of the public and get the citizens to act as they wanted them to. The media's use of the correct language can have a tremendous impact on society and how people react to it. Counterargument. On the other hand, language can be good because we use language to communicate ideas, and if we can't put our thoughts into words and communicate with others, then we can't form knowledge. Language has benefited me personally in helping me to understand the world and pass that knowledge on. Language allows me to hear and understand the events the media portrays to me and relay them using my language to others. As the public, we are unable to rely on the media to provide us with an accurate representation of the events that occur in our society due to the media's constant practice of over-exaggerating certain aspects of a story and the twisting of words and manipulation of the public's mind and knowledge of a specific event. Our knowledge of what is true and what is false in the world will never be correct if we simply rely on the media for information. The media is constantly misinforming us and causing us to have an incorrect view of what is actually happening in the world, causing us to have a false perception of the world and the events occurring in it. The only way for us as the public to gain truthful and valid information is for us to use the 4 ways of knowing in order to think for ourselves and question if what the media says is legitimate or not. Only when we take what the media and what we know into consideration can we use this in combination in order to formulate a valid truth of the events occurring in our world. However, no matter how much reason and logic we use, we are still basing what we know on information that could be completely false. If we can't believe what's going on based on what we see or what others tell us because they exaggerate and manipulate it, how are we supposed to have any knowledge of the world? We can't. We will always just be confused and never know for sure whether what we believe is true or whether it is flawed based on what the media tells us. We can try to find the truth in the situation as much as possible. Therefore, everything we believe is a lie because we can't believe the information the media tells us, and we can't believe what we see ourselves due to our flawed perception. Therefore, we will never have a perfect understanding of the world and the events occurring in it. According to the Gallup organization, Americans' distrust of the media has just hit a new record, with 6 in 10 Americans saying they have little or no trust in mass media to report the news fully, accurately, and fairly. 40% say they have a great deal or fair amount of trust. Since these numbers are so high, you would think that people would finally do something about it and use their ways of knowing to change the way they absorb information without critically thinking first. We need to use our own mind to decide what we believe is true and what is exaggerated.